Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And I'm Steve Hayes.
and we are the FAIRtax Guys
FAIRtax.
sitting here at our fancy virtual desk here. I still have Fat Albert, and you've probably still got your scrolling banner there somewhere, but there it is. We'll check that out. But again, well, for those of you who have been living under a rock for a while, Steve Hayes is the president of Americans for Fair Taxation, the national level grassroots organization, writes the chairman's report every week. And you can check that out at fairtax.org or check it out on our YouTube channel as well. And Steve, the reason we wanted to have you on today, besides the fact that you haven't been on in a while, we like to have you on at least a semi-regular basis. Well, the chairman's report, a fairly recent chairman's report, was talking about the reaction to several tax proposals that the presidential candidates, primarily Donald Trump, but Kamala Harris has picked up on some of this regarding how they want to exempt certain income from taxation. And it started with Donald Trump's pledge, no tax on tips. Now, most of the time when a political candidate takes a position, their opponent will take the absolute opposite position and say that's a rotten idea, we shouldn't do it. But Kamala Harris picked up on the same thing right away. I think they're both vying for the votes of people who work in the service industry and saying no tax on tips. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
Well, I think the three of us on this show think it's a great idea, but we would go obviously a lot further and say there shouldn't be any tax on income of any kind. We should only tax when people make retail purchases of new goods and services, retail services, the fair tax. And we think it's a great idea. You know, and it's interesting because back in 2016, Trump was on Joe Scarborough's show, and he was on some others, and he was asked about tax reform, and he said, well, I'm not sure whether it's going to be, should be the fair tax or a flat tax. I'm hearing both, but I like them both. And when he was in Iowa, you know, he was like, he got the last of the consultants available because all the other candidates had vacuumed up all the real experienced ones, and the ones he hired were ironically fair tax supporters. And they talked to him about the fair tax. So he's very aware. Steve Moore, who's on our National Board of Advisors, is one of the people advising Trump on economic policy. So I don't think this is a, Trump throwaway idea. I think this is Trump signaling that he'd like to get rid of the income tax. I just think there is some confusion with what he would do.
Well, go ahead, Bob.
Ask this question about that one thing you just said. He has an advisor with him that's key in on the fair tax and all the benefits.
Right.
Do you think that what Trump is doing is just dropping little nuggets of relief out there that to see what people will do, or is it a campaign ploy, or what's your read on that? And
I think he's very serious. I mean, the feedback that I got, and it was from several different people that were with Trump, would visit with Trump. Gordon Kane, remember he ran for president. He was big in helping Trump. Gordon had talked to him about it a number of times, the fair tax. And Senator Perdue had talked to him about it. He was close to him. And Trump's position was, at that point, this was not the entire position, but this is kind of what my takeaway was. It's a great idea. I hate the income tax. I hate having the IRS harass people. But if I tried to do it in my first term, it would be demagogue that I was a rich guy trying to avoid paying taxes. Now, at that time, nobody knew that he didn't pay any taxes anyway, But that was what he was, telling them. but he said, we'll look at all these options in the second term. So I think that he knows that it's better for people. He knows it's better for trade. And I frankly think he's using this tariff idea of funding everything through tariffs because nobody really understands it. As you looked at that debate with Vance and Waltz accuses Trump of instituting a 20% national sales tax. So it's out there that people know. I mean, we know DeSantis was in favor of it, the fair tax.
Trump gave him some jazz for it.
Oh, he did. And because Trump attacks anybody, who's running against him. But Trump, I think Bob, it's a long answer, but in answer to the question, I think he's very serious. Whether he will have the votes is going to be a different thing, but I think he's going to have, if he's elected, he's going to have enough, let's just say, energy going that when he starts reforming, he's talking about reforming the FBI, he's talking about reforming the CIA, he's talking about reforming all those alphabet agencies, the EPA, he's mentioned one time or another, probably all of them. And you look at who he's aligning himself with, Vivek Ramaswamy, is that how you say it? Anyway, says that he has volunteered and Trump's accepted to help him cut 50% or more of the bureaucracy in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Robert Kennedy Jr., who's saying that he's going to get an opportunity to really go after the medical complex that's just been milking people, like on the COVID scam, what they did. So you've got a huge, and that's why I think they've tried to kill him twice. I say they, but he's been, attempted assassination twice. And it's like a very scary thing to those people because he really is going to threaten their power. I mean, one of the things that somebody close to him said is that he wanted to move the FBI headquarters to someplace like Kansas City, in the middle of the country, to get it out of D.C.
Mm-hmm. Well, that
where
makes
it would
sense.
function as not a political animal, but really as a law enforcement animal.
That would work.
Yep. And so he's a real threat. And I think the most consequential change he could make that would give more freedom to people is what we are supporting, which is to transfer the power out of D.C. to us individually to determine how much tax we pay.
Mm-hmm. And FAIRtax will do that for sure.
That's right.
You will decide when you pay your taxes, how much you pay, and stuff like that. I want to take a kind of a different tack here. Usually, just kind of the stereotypical presentation of a Democrat is somebody that wants to raise taxes on everybody. That Democrats have never seen a tax that they didn't like, and for Kamala Harris to come out and say no tax on tips, so she's in favor of a tax cut like that. Of course, the Democrat Party, as an institution, has been bitterly opposed to the fair tax for decades. Do you think that her taking that position, that let's not tax this income, might be a softening of sorts from the opposition from the Democrat side of the aisle?
I think it's something that's been brewing for a long time, Bob. Ben Cardin had the plan, which he introduced in Congress. He actually asked for a meeting with me before Hillary was nominated. And we talked about his plan, which was to replace the present tax system with a retail sales tax. He plainly said it was modeled on the fair tax for the first 100,000 of income. Mm-hmm. And then have income tax above 100. I think there were 3 brackets. And then, even though as a stopgap, he was going to have a corporate income tax, he wanted to go to a value-added tax. So he did that in 2015. And a lot of members of Congress on the Democrat side were not really saying anything bad about it because he would have a rebate, a prebate on the tax on the first 100. And he was very confident that it was going to help trade because it would. You basically are helping on pricing of trade and everything. And so he then went radio silent after Hillary got nominated. I think I may have said this before on the air, but one of the members of Congress from Maryland, he's a senator from Maryland, told me that, yes, he asked Ben in another meeting at some point about it, and Ben just said, well, it's something I think Hillary may endorse when she's elected. Because back then, she was a shoo-in. Mm-hmm. So he didn't want to give any credit to anybody except Hillary.
Right.
Putting it in. So I think they toyed with the idea. I think Harris probably would do it, but I'm not so sure it would be for the right reasons. I think what she might be tempted to look at would be doing a version of the fair tax that still had an income tax, or at least it had a much higher percentage for bigger purchases so that she'd punish the rich. And then a much higher prebate. In other words, right now we cover $40,000 of purchases for a family of four. A little more than that, but roughly that. Jared Bernstein, who is one of the economic advisors, when I talked to him, he thought 60,000 would be more sensible. Well, what that effectively does is it gives guaranteed income to the family of four making 40 because they get the prebate amount, about 10 grand, on buying 40 grand. So they actually have another 10 grand of income. So it's a guaranteed annual income idea.
Do you think that once people figure out the Washington game, and Trump has been, pushing against the bureaucracy for a long time, obviously in his career, but also as president of the United States and now candidate for a second term, do you think that pushback has now gotten enough mainstream media coverage that the common man who's not really into politics that much and doesn't follow the news as closely as we do or anybody else does, do you think that people are now starting to wake up a little bit to the challenges of the bloated bureaucracy that we have and how much money we're spending in different places? I think with the hurricane here in North Carolina and the money that's being spent in recovery efforts there, plus the Ukraine, plus everything else that's going on in the country with deficits where they are, do you think the common man is starting to wake up a little bit to how really bad off we are because of the structures in Washington that have not been touched for decades, literally?
I think it's interesting. I wrote a chairman's report talking about public and private opinion. Mm-hmm. And they did an extensive survey. I think it was like 20,000 people. So it wasn't that normal 800 people or whatever. And they said publicly, if you were asked, do you trust government? What would you say? And something like 25 to 30% said, yeah, we trust government. And then they said, okay, well, privately though, what's your real feeling? 5% trust government. And about the same percentage trust the media privately. So most people take with a huge, not grain of salt, but a shaker of salt, anything the media says now. Because they know that these people in the media they're like people hawking products. Like you see an infomercial, the guy's trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner or something. Well, I think a lot of people are looking at the media the same way. We got these people trying to sell us something that isn't necessarily the right thing for us. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm not sure what, you're talking to people every day, Bob, I just don't think that people are buying it. You can see it from the ratings of the TV shows. Look at the network news ratings, how far down they've gone. Back when, I'll say this, the three of us were much younger. You had Walter Cronkite, you had, the different newscasters that were really listened to every night with
I
a
like
big viewership.
David Brinkley was always a guy I
David
liked.
Brinkley and Chet Huntley. Yep. Those are people that were probably a little skewed, but yet mostly they told, here's the news. And that's gone. Look at all the scandals that they found with these different newscasters that have been relieved of their duties. And, you've got a situation. It's like, I don't know if you follow Tucker Carlson or not, but he had a very successful show on Fox, but he refused to follow the party line, and they canned him. They terminated him. He's now got a much bigger show through the internet, through his own, I don't know what it is. Bob Scarborough, you might know, but it's, some kind of thing where he does it on YouTube, but he also does it through his own web channel.
Yes, and on X. I mean, the platforms are there and can be distributed across numerous, wherever you might happen to be. It is what I call a podcast on steroids. Once video was introduced into the podcast universe, it put the ability of consumers like us, we consume news or sports or whatever our liking is, whether it be in short 10-second, 30-second form or an hour-long or 2-hour-long program or longer. A lot of people that we normally thought of as in traditional media, and so, well, they're gone off of the TV. I can't watch them, but I can take my phone and I can cast it over to my television. I can actually put a show on my phone and hit a button, and it'll end up on my television set 15 feet away. And so the thought of the old over-the-air broadcast television and radio too, for that matter, that terrestrial network is now in a wire or through like with Starlink, a low Earth orbit satellite connection to the web. And that's where everybody's living now.
Right.
Even ABC and CBS and NBC and the traditional networks are there too. Everybody is blazing a new trail, disrupting the old way of consuming the news. And that's why I asked a minute ago, Trump has got his toe in the edge of the pool with what he's doing, and Kamala Harris for that matter too. But I mean, we don't get into the politics of how everything works, but I would think that we are getting ready as volunteers with the FAIRtax to see an explosion of interest and further understanding of the concepts that follow a tax on consumption. And with everybody talking about, my gosh, how big this thing is. You go up to Washington, you see all these wonderful buildings, and you tour around, and your representative take a picture on the steps of the Congress and all that, and you get a nice little black and white photo to put on your, mantle. We are now experiencing 24/7 news where we can take it instantaneously. Back to Walter Cronkite, you had to be at home at 6 o'clock.
Right.
7 to watch those shows, and now you can consume it anywhere. Hey, I didn't stay up for the vice presidential debate a week or so ago, or whenever it was. I got it in 10-second sound bites now. Right. I don't have to watch the whole thing. I can pick and choose, and if I want to go watch the whole thing, I can. So, I mean, there's a lot of political junkies that love that stuff, but I think we're close to, if not on top of, because of the exposure that we're getting at the presidential level as important as this election is for both parties
Right.
and for the bureaucracy, that we're seeing a great number of people waking up. And I think that I think it will happen a lot faster than we've seen. I think our interest and popularity of the fair tax will grow exponentially over the next couple of years as opposed to the last 30.
I 100% agree. I mean, it's almost like the the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
Nobody knew it was going to come down until, frankly, almost the day it came down. People were predicting it'd be 30 years later or whatever, and then like that.
Yeah, they had no idea, and it
Yep.
happened like that. And it was not. It was standing until it wasn't.
That's right.
Then one person, and then 20, and then 100, and then 1,000.
And basically, I think we're talking about that there's going to be a reckoning coming up, and I can't tell you for sure, Bob, it's this election or the next one, but it's coming because people, as you said, I see it all the time. I do podcasts and different shows fairly often, and people are asking the right questions now.
Mm-hmm.
That was always missing before, I thought, but now they're kind of asking the right questions. Why do we need blah, blah, blah? What are they doing for us?
One thing we always say here is none of us really lived during a time where there wasn't an income tax. So
right.
We think this is it. This is the way we do it. Well, there was a way before. Tariffs were included in a little bit of the before. And so now we have this opportunity to be available once people start asking those detailed questions, which they're doing on social media. We have a page that's I'm on some messenger section of Facebook that has questions every day. Several people are asking the same ones over and over again, but they're out there, like you said, Steve, watching a little more closely what is taking place. And we just have to be available as FAIRtax volunteers to be able to answer those questions and continue a very substantive conversation going forward.
And that's why it's so important what you and Bob Paxton are doing, Bob, because it's educating people and giving them the opportunity to get in portions they can understand, more understanding of the tax system and the fact, who out there, particularly who out there who's a senior, doesn't want to have no tax on Social Security?
Oh, let me tell you, I don't get Social Security yet. I'm holding off. I want the big number. I want the big number. So
you hold off too long, and that big number is going to go down to zero.
Well, right. Unless we do the fair tax, because the fair tax absolutely makes it solvent.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. You caught on that. That's good. We got about 4.5 minutes left, Steve. I want to kind of take off on one more little subject to dig into. I have noticed, and it's just par for the course when somebody makes a political proposition, that when Trump says no tax on tips, then no tax on Social Security, and then no tax on overtime. We haven't mentioned that yet. You get a lot of reaction that says, "Oh, wait a minute! If you do that, it's going to cost the government so much money." People are still in the box of thinking that our money belongs first to the government, and then they can, let us have what they want us to have afterwards. The fair tax turns that on its head. The fair tax means every dime you make is yours. You bring it home, and you don't worry about what the government owns, because the government does not own any of your money on the fair tax until you decide to give it to them.
Right. So you spend it on retail purchases of new goods and retail services. No, that's a very important point. And a lot of the reason why Trump is talking about cutting the bureaucracy is that a lot of those bureaucrats who are being paid I believe it's 40% more than a comparable job in the regular sector, that a lot of those people are simply there to continue their job.
Mm-hmm.
Like look at the Department of Education. Since Jimmy Carter put that in, look at what's happened to education. You have actually seen schools like in Chicago where 10% of the students can read at grade level?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're having to be graduated just because of age and this idea, oh, you don't want to upset them by holding them back. It's bad for their ego. But it's worse when they get out of these, quote, schools and they can't read. They can't work at McDonald's because they don't have the requisite skills in math to even use a register.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've got people who are trapped, and this is a bureaucracy that's grown and grown and grown. I'm just using one example, the education department. And you've got that replicated all through DC, where people, well-meaning, I actually think most of what Carter did was well-meaning in his own mind. He thought he was doing well. But practically speaking, it subsidized a growing bureaucracy and not the product it was supposed to get. And I think people are realizing that, not only at the federal level, but look at the state level. Look at the city level. And Chicago is tolerating results that people in Florida wouldn't tolerate. In Florida, you had DeSantis giving school choice. Boy, the unions hated that, because now you've got masses of people going to schools where their kids learn.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're not public schools. Although some are public schools. You now can go to a public school in Florida if there's space available, no matter where you live.
Yep.
You have to file a paper, but it's there. So I think what's true, Bob, is what you said. People are realizing that it's our money and we're not getting what we're supposedly paying for.
All right.
Well,
Well, I'm afraid.
the amount of money that's being spent on, not any particular political side, but there's a lot of money that's being thrown around out there, and we have more than just the 6 o'clock news to be able to talk to us, to have a discussion with us about what really is going on.
That's totally correct.
All right. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time again, and time flies when you're having fun. And one of our favorite sayings here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Hopefully, the prospects of no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security can be carried on to its ultimate conclusion of no taxes on any income ever. Hopefully, we can get there. And Steve, again, thanks for your time for coming on the program with us. We will have you back here before too awfully much longer.
I look forward to it, Bob. Thanks for having me very much.
All righty. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for watching, sharing the videos, leaving comments if you like. But until we meet again, same time, same channel next week. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
I'm Steve Hayes.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month. On everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.